So after a long day yesterday in Stockholm at the Swedish Radon Day, I got the opportunity to bring with me Dr. Goodarzi from the University of Calgary, and also my dear colleague José Luis Gutiérrez Villanueva.
Perfect Spanish.
Did I get this right?
Perfect Spanish, yes.
Well, I've been practicing this all night.
Just arrived from the airport. So.
From the airport?
Yes.
Well, that's the best way to do it. So, we had the opportunity to bring these gentlemen here, and we want to start with picking their brain a bit about the radon sector. Beginning with one topic that I've been thinking about a lot, and I know internally at Radonova we've been discussing, and it is that one of the by effects of the unprecedented pandemic that happened a couple of years ago now is that people are working from home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they enjoy this, they want to keep working from home. But the problem from this, as you may imagine, is what about the radon levels in their home? If they have high radon levels in their home, now all of a sudden they spend all their day, 24 hours of their day in their home, which may cause a problem to their health.
Yeah.
What's your view on this?
Yeah, so this is something that we've been worried about, again, really since March of 2020, when the pandemic really started to affect most of us in the West in the way that it did. And so we've actually studied it, and that will be released very soon. We're now 2023. And basically what we found is that people have spent 10.6% more of their year in their primary house because they're not at the office and they're not at other people's houses in the way that we were before the pandemic started to affect us. Now, one of the things that produced is actually a surprising 20% increase in actual radon exposure because it, at least in Canada, impacted younger people more. And in that case, there's a bias towards higher radon exposure for the young. And so this has large implications to occupational health and safety, and is indicative of a future where when we are working from our places that we live with very different radon risks, we now need to consider that a lot more than we ever did before.
So maybe you can chime in here, Jose, because obviously this is a big problem for us working in the radon industry, but for actors like governments and etc. Do you feel that they're taking the right action, the right steps to erase this problem?
Well, actually, I remember in one of the board meetings of the European Radon Association, I think it was one of the first meetings after the pandemic started to hit, we started to discuss this issue, and it was like nobody knew what to do. Because it's a little bit complicated, to tackle this problem, especially in Europe. In Europe, it's a little bit different from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, we are 27 countries in Europe with multiple cultures and different governments. So, but yeah, definitely something that they need to start thinking about. Yeah.
What do you think would be the correct steps forward to solve this?
So I'll start by saying that it's too new to fully know exactly what is going to be appropriate. A lot of people who are opting into new full-time telecommuting or hybrid telecommuting, meaning, they work from home for some of the week. Those are now formalized agreements versus the sort of more casual approach that we take in as part of the emergency response to the pandemic. Well, if you have a formalized work from home agreement, it could often be part of that agreement that either you as the employee have ensured that the environment in which you are working is safe, or your employer provides you the resources in order to ensure that air is safe by performing a radon test, and if that's high, reducing the levels.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it'll be very interesting to see in the coming years what happens with this, because I think we can all agree that the phenomenon of working from home is not going anywhere.
Correct. It's definitely a new normal that is here to stay, and if it does stay the way it is, folks like myself who are in the world of cancer research and predicting future burdens of lung cancer, well, the writing is on the wall. If we don't respond to it today and adequately, we will see a much increased burden of future lung cancers as a consequence of the changes that have happened in the past 3 years.
That's right, because this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a lagging effect, right?
Absolutely.
You live in these conditions right now and you feel, well, it's too early to solve this. We're not sure exactly the effects of this.
For about 10 years.
But the damage is done, it's being done right this second.
Absolutely, that's right.
It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Hopefully we move towards some sort of legislation, whatever it may be, to help figuring this out all over Europe, and especially here in Sweden, because it's a big problem and it will continue to be until we see any actions. Moving on to one other question that I have,
Okay.
which is important to us again at Radonova,
Mm-hmm.
which is in Sweden, after a workplace have conducted a long-term measurements.
Mm-hmm.
We have what's called a 7-day follow-up measurement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with this concept?
Sure.
So we do this with a calibrated instrument, and it's what we would like to know is this a common thing all over Europe and in the areas you work?
Well, I can't speak to Europe. In Canada, yes, we have a regimented process by which workplaces will be radon tested. And then, of course, follow up following any action to reduce the radon to confirm that it has worked. That's relatively standardized where we are, and it's usually done with a combination of short-term passive testing or short-term active continuous radon monitoring. Yeah, can't speak to Europe, perhaps you know more.
Yeah, I mean in Europe, I think only probably Sweden and Finland have this type of
right.
follow-up measurement scheme on the table at the moment. But I am aware that there are other countries that are trying to do similar things also.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the benefit of this? Because I know here in Sweden we get an approved protocol from these type of measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a new way of measuring in workplaces.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't always been like this. Do you see any obvious benefits of this way?
Well, you can immediately make sure that what you've done to reduce the radon actually has worked,
Yeah,
right? I mean, always check your work,
Yeah.
right? And that's a lesson across sectors and industries. And whether you're a little child checking their homework, you need to know that it's worked what you've done. And so this is absolutely the case where someone's potential long-term health is at risk.
Yeah.
You need to know that what's been done has actually worked, and this is a great way of doing that.
So when it comes to radon in workplaces specifically, other than this 7-day measurement, do you see any obvious changes to how people measure radon in workplaces in for example, Canada?
I think there's going to be a lot more workplaces that need to be radon tested as, again, work habits change and as the nature of the office changes. The built environment is also constantly changing in terms of how it captures, contains, and concentrates radon. And so businesses and employers have to be nimble in order to respond to that with good information to protect their employees.
Now we're able, with the new techniques and the new different measurements, Radonova has the Spirit digital detector, right?
Okay.
So with these new measurements where you can create specific dashboards to generate these approved protocols, this opens up these areas for these types of measurements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any other ways where we can improve measurement, not only in workplaces but in homes, specifically in the Nordic, because I know you've been working with these markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about awareness question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to bring people on the table and try to convince them that it is important they measure at home.
Yeah.
At the moment, there are in Europe several projects, probably in Canada also. I am aware you did some citizen science projects.
That's right.
I remember the project that you did with public libraries. It was amazing. Very good idea.
Well, that wasn't us, but we certainly supported it in sort of spirit. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, but I think definitely this is the way to go. I mean, and citizen science can be an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to make people interested of measuring radon, actually, and they feel like they are the protagonist.
Yes,
of
absolutely.
the game. It is much better.
That's been one of the complete game changers in Canada, is leveraging enthusiastic members of the general public who have an interest in science, but also the protection of their own health.
Yeah.
And while we've been doing passive radon testing again for many years, we more recently have been doing digital continuous radon monitoring in many houses in multiple Canadian cities, and that has been really powerful. People get very interested where they can see how the levels will fluctuate, for example, with the weather or with their own behavior, and actions that they can take then to reduce that if they interpret that reading as being high.
Yeah, sure. I think this is also, again, this is an important area of this market.
That's right.
We'll see where it takes us, and hopefully with new digital instruments, we're enabling more types of measurements we maybe weren't possible to do just a few years ago.
That's right.
Absolutely, and I would like to add also that it's a good idea to bring children on the game also.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I can speak from my own experience. I mean, my son loved to see
Yeah.
how the radon levels go up and down, and this is really good because if children show interest, parents show interest as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So sometimes children are like a driving force.
And that's where it starts, right? So
Yeah.
mainly families, you know, they need to think about
Mm.
the children, because if you plan to live in your family home for many years to come,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of new parents with children, and especially grandparents, who are obtaining radon tests to ensure that the air that their new children, grandchildren are breathing is the absolute safest, because early life exposure, if it's high enough, can mean teenage 20s and 30s lung cancer, right? And there's many examples of individuals I've met who they're in their early 30s having their own children at a time where they're struggling with often end-stage lung cancer because of early life radon exposure.
And I'm sure, Aaron, you can answer this question about the radiosensitivity of the kids.
That's right.
Is it higher than
Yeah.
when you are an adult?
Absolutely. All children are sensitive to things in our environment that cause
Mhm.
cancer, but particularly radiation because of multiple reasons.
Mhm.
You know, innately their growing tissue is radiation sensitive, but children have little lungs. They breathe faster than we do because they have little bodies. The dose is that much higher. And they have that much more life left within which to develop a lung cancer following exposure at a young age. And so innately, children are more sensitive, and we as adults who control their environment have a responsibility
Absolutely.
to protect them.
Absolutely.